When my daughter rolled her eyes and said, "Dad, it's just a $2 ticket," I laughed it off, even though it stung more than I admitted. By the end of that week, that same ticket had flipped my entire life upside down. I'm talking about a $120 million twist nobody saw coming. Justice had to be served. You won't believe what happened next. Stay with me, and subscribe if you believe karma always finds its way. I've always been a man who believed in routine. Up every morning at 6:30, a cup of black coffee in my favorite chipped Steelers mug, and out the door by 7:15 to beat the I-79 traffic into Pittsburgh. I worked as a project manager for a mid-sized construction firm, not glamorous, but it paid the bills, gave me health insurance, and helped me keep up with the mortgage on our 3-bedroom colonial out in Cranberry Township. My daughter, Emily, was 22 and fresh out of college, majoring in communications. Smart kid, quick wit, though sometimes a little too sarcastic for her own good. She was living back at home until she could save enough to rent her own apartment downtown. And like most young adults, she thought her dad was behind the times, hopelessly out of touch with real life. That lottery ticket fight happened on a chilly Tuesday night. We were both standing in the kitchen when she grabbed my last dollar bill off the counter. "Dad, relax. It's just a scratch-off," she said, waving it like a joke. I raised an eyebrow. "That's not the point, Em. You don't just take money without asking." She laughed. "Oh, come on, you've got a 401k, a steady paycheck, and a mortgage you never stop complaining about. What's one lousy ticket?" Her words stung more than I let on. That 401k wasn't exactly healthy. Between helping her with tuition, fixing the roof after last winter's storm, and some medical bills of my own, the truth was I barely had 15 grand tucked away. Not the retirement dream they promised us back when HR pushed those glossy brochures during orientation. Still, I brushed it off. She was young. She didn't understand responsibility yet. But here's the thing, life has a cruel way of turning throwaway moments into crossroads. That scratch-off ticket, the one I thought was just a silly splurge, ended up worth $120 million from the state lottery. $120 million. And that's when the ground beneath our family started to crack. At first, it was surreal. Emily screamed louder than I'd ever heard when the clerk scanned it at the gas station and the machine locked up, flashing "Call Lottery Commission." She called me in a frenzy, and I thought it was a prank. But the lottery officials confirmed it within 2 days. I was stunned. After years of budgeting, clipping coupons, choosing generic brands at the grocery store, suddenly, I was the man holding a ticket that could wipe away every bill and every ounce of financial stress. But instead of gratitude, Emily's eyes changed. She wasn't looking at me like her father anymore, she was looking at me like competition. And that was the first foreshadow I ignored. I'll never forget that Sunday morning. The church bells down the street were chiming, and I was flipping pancakes in my old cast-iron skillet. My daughter, Emma, came downstairs in her sweats, scrolling on her phone like usual. "Dad, the Mega Millions jackpot is up to $120 million, she said. "You should play. Maybe it'll change your luck." She laughed, half joking, like she always did. I grinned. "Luck? My luck is getting this pancake to flip without it hitting the floor." She smirked. "Seriously though, Dad, what's $2? You're always talking about how broke you are since Mom left and the mortgage doubled. Maybe you need a miracle." That one cut deeper than she knew. She was right. My 401k was drained after the divorce, I was 2 months behind on the house payment, and HR had just warned me about possible downsizing at work. A miracle wouldn't hurt. So later that day, I walked into the corner gas station, bought a coffee, and grabbed a Mega Millions quick pick. $2. Didn't think twice. I tucked the ticket into my wallet behind an old picture of Emma at her high school graduation. Fast forward to Tuesday night. I was sitting on the couch, TV muted, eating leftover Chinese takeout. The winning numbers scrolled across the screen. At first, I thought I was hallucinating. One by one, every single number lined up. My hands started shaking so bad I dropped my fork. I had just won $120 million. I couldn't breathe. I paced the living room, sweating, whispering, "This can't be real." I checked 3 different sites, then rechecked again. But it was real. $2 had just rewritten my entire life. I didn't sleep at all that night. By dawn, I had already called the state lottery office and scheduled my appointment. They told me I could take the lump sum, $72 million after taxes. My mortgage worries, my 401k stress, HR's layoff threat, gone. But here's the thing nobody tells you: money doesn't just change your life. It changes how people treat you. When I told Emma, her jaw dropped. At first, she screamed and hugged me. "Dad, we're rich." But by the next day, she was texting me links to million-dollar houses in Los Angeles. Her boyfriend Tyler, who'd never cared to shake my hand before, suddenly started calling me sir and asking about investment opportunities. Then my sister, who hadn't spoken to me in 2 years, showed up at my door with a pie like it was Thanksgiving. My cousin Dave, who used to borrow tools and never return them, suddenly invited me to dinner. It was like the second people smelled money, I stopped being me. I became their golden ticket. But the worst sting came at Christmas dinner. Emma had planned it at her apartment with Tyler. I showed up with gifts, nothing flashy, just thoughtful stuff. I even bought Emma a used car she'd been eyeing, paid in cash. As we sat down, Tyler raised his glass and joked, "To the man with the money, our new family bank." Everyone laughed, except me. Then Emma, my own daughter, leaned across the table and whispered with that same eye-roll smirk, "Dad, don't get it twisted. It was just a $2 ticket. If I hadn't told you to buy it, you'd still be broke. Honestly, you owe me." Her words hit me harder than any mortgage bill or HR notice ever had. That night, staring at the ceiling in my empty house, I realized something. The people I loved most weren't happy for me. They were hungry for what was mine. And that's when the real fight began. I figured things couldn't get worse after the grocery store argument, but boy, was I wrong. The light twist came just 3 days later. I had finished fixing the leaky faucet in the kitchen when my phone buzzed. It was my sister, Maggie. She never called me unless something was dead serious. "Dan, you sitting down?" she asked. "Mags, it's 8 a.m., what could possibly be?" "You bought a Powerball ticket last week, right? Dad's old numbers? The same ones you've been playing for years." My heart stuttered. "Yeah, why?" "Well," she said, her voice shaking, "those numbers hit. I'm staring at the news ticker right now. The winning ticket was sold at Red's Market, 3 blocks from your house." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The faucet wrench slipped out of my hand and clattered on the floor. My knees went weak. All I could picture was that little slip of paper I'd handed my daughter to hold onto while I grabbed the milk. The same ticket she'd rolled her eyes at. The same ticket she had walked out of the store with. I scrambled to the drawer where I usually kept my tickets. Empty. I checked my wallet. Nothing. Panic set in as the realization hit me like a punch. My daughter had the ticket. I called her immediately. "Emily, it's Dad. Honey, you still got that Powerball ticket from last week? The one with Grandpa's numbers." There was a pause. Too long of a pause. "Dad," she finally said, her tone flat, "I don't know what you're talking about." The lie sliced through me sharper than any blade. Emily was a terrible liar. I raised her, I knew every tell. And right then I knew, she wasn't planning on giving that ticket back. "Emily, don't play with me. This is serious. That ticket is worth millions." She gave a short laugh, the kind that didn't belong to my little girl anymore. "Well, maybe that's karma, huh? You always cared more about your stupid numbers than you did about me growing up. Maybe this is life's way of paying me back." I froze. My own daughter was spitting venom I didn't even know was bottled up inside her. And worse? She was holding onto something that wasn't just money. It was my father's legacy, my family's tradition, my decades-long persistence. When I hung up, my hands were trembling. Maggie called me back almost instantly, her voice frantic. "Dan, what's going on? You sound like you saw a ghost." I told her the truth. I think Emily has the ticket. And she's not giving it back. Silence. Then Maggie whispered, "Dan, you need to be careful. This isn't just about money anymore. If she cashes it, legally, it's hers. Unless you prove otherwise. You might need a lawyer." That was the moment the weight of it all sank in. Not just the betrayal, but the potential legal war ahead. It wasn't a father-daughter squabble anymore. It was shaping up to be a courtroom battle over $120 million. And here's the kicker, I didn't even have proof that ticket was mine. Just memories. Just tradition. Just trust that had already been shattered. The light twist wasn't just winning the lottery. It was realizing my daughter might have just stolen my entire future, and she thought she had every right to keep it. I don't think my daughter, Ashley, or my son Tyler, ever really knew who I was. They thought of me as some worn-down old man who used to work in construction, who brought home takeout when their mom was sick, who didn't understand the modern world. They never saw beyond the faded jeans, the calloused hands, and the rusted Ford pickup sitting in my driveway. But what they never knew, the secret I carried with me for decades, was that I wasn't just some broke, washed-up guy barely making ends meet. I had spent years planning, investing, and protecting myself in ways that no one in the family even thought possible. See, when I was younger, back in my 30s, I worked construction jobs up and down the East Coast. Long hours, heavy lifting, brutal winters. My back still carries the scars. But instead of blowing my paycheck at bars like some of the guys, I listened to this old foreman, Pete, who drilled one thing into my head: put a little away in your 401k. Buy land if you can. Don't trust anyone to look after you but yourself. And I did. Quietly. Every extra dollar I could scrape together went into investments. Nothing flashy, no Tesla stock, no crypto garbage. I bought farmland in upstate New York when it was dirt cheap. I paid off a little 2-bedroom house I rented out to college kids. I contributed to my 401k religiously, never skipping, even when money was tight. And when their mother passed away, God rest her soul, I made sure her life insurance policy didn't just vanish. I put it straight into safe bonds and mutual funds. So while Ashley thought she was helping me by buying her father-in-law a Rolex for Father's Day and handing me a $2 lottery ticket as a joke, she never knew I already had close to $3 million in assets sitting quietly in my portfolio. Here's the part that still gets me: I never flaunted it. I could have driven a brand new F-150, maybe even a Cadillac if I wanted. I could have taken vacations, gone to Florida every winter like some of the guys. But I didn't. I kept it simple. My wife and I always agreed: save for retirement, live within our means, and don't spoil the kids with everything they ask for. But Ashley and Tyler? They didn't inherit that mindset. Ashley married a guy who thinks life is about designer bags, Instagram vacations, and keeping up appearances. Tyler, on the other hand, works in HR at some mid-sized tech company in Boston, but he spends money faster than it hits his checking account. He refinanced his mortgage twice just to buy a Tesla and a new kitchen backsplash. And every time he's in trouble, he calls me, like I'm his personal bailout fund. They never once asked me how I made it through layoffs, medical bills, mortgage payments, and funerals without falling apart. They just assumed I had nothing. That I was nothing. But here's the twist: I've been quietly preparing for the day I might need to protect myself, legally and financially, from my own kids. I had already spoken with an estate lawyer years ago. I had a will, a trust, even a clause about cutting off anyone who disrespected me or tried to manipulate me for money. That lawyer, Mr. Daniels, was the only person who knew the full truth. And that Father's Day, when Ashley laughed as she slid that $2 ticket across the table like I was some joke, I remembered every conversation I'd had with Mr. Daniels. I remembered my wife's words too: if they don't respect you now, don't leave them the power to disrespect your memory later. That ticket, ironically enough, wasn't just a joke. It turned into the biggest jackpot of the year, $120 million. But the truth is, that money didn't change who I was. It just gave me the leverage to finally reveal what I'd been holding back all along. See, what my kids didn't know was that my will already excluded them. Years of their disrespect had carved that decision in stone long before I ever scratched off a winning number. But winning that jackpot? That gave me the power to enforce it publicly. To look them in the eye and say, "You laughed at me. You treated me like nothing. And now? You get nothing." As I sat in my lawyer's office after the win, I laid it all out. Not only was I updating the will to ensure not a single penny went to Ashley or Tyler, but I was structuring everything in a charitable trust. Scholarships for kids from working-class families. Donations to veterans' housing projects. Investments in community centers. Because if my own blood couldn't see my worth, then strangers who respected hard work and dignity damn sure would. And that's when I realized something. The past wasn't just a story of me being ignored, humiliated, or laughed at. It was also the story of me quietly preparing for this exact moment. The moment when the tables would turn, not because luck handed me a $120 million ticket, but because I had already built a foundation of independence and foresight they couldn't touch. That's what Ashley and Tyler never saw. They thought they held all the power because I kept my life simple. But the truth was, I'd been stacking the deck in my favor for decades. And when I revealed this past to them, when I laid out how every dollar, every choice, every late night on a construction site had built into something far bigger than they could ever understand, it wasn't just about shocking them. It was about reminding myself, I was never the powerless one in this family. The day of the lawyers' meeting arrived like a storm brewing on the horizon. I had asked both Emily and Michael to be there. If they wanted answers, I was finally ready to give them some. I wore the same navy blue suit I used to wear back when I was a financial analyst, back when people took me seriously. It felt symbolic. I wasn't just dad or the walking ATM anymore. I was a man who'd built, lost, and rebuilt his life. They came in late, of course. Emily with her designer handbag swinging from her shoulder, Michael with his phone glued to his hand. No hi, Dad. Not even a how are you. Just irritated sighs, as if this meeting was eating into their real lives. Okay, Dad, Emily started, rolling her eyes. Can we just get this over with? I've got a spa appointment at 2. Michael added, and I'm supposed to meet with a realtor. Unless you're finally ready to sign the house over, this is kind of a waste of my time. My lawyer, Mr. Harris, adjusted his glasses and looked at me. He was a calm, meticulous man, the kind who enjoyed watching dominoes fall in slow motion. He gave me a subtle nod. It was time. I leaned forward, my hands clasped on the polished table. Before we start, I said evenly, I want to clear something up. For months, I felt like you both see me as some burden to deal with. Like I'm just sitting around, waiting to hand you whatever's left of my life. Is that fair to say? Emily scoffed. Dad, don't make this dramatic. We just think it makes sense to plan ahead. Michael smirked. Yeah. You don't want the house falling into probate court, do you? We're just being practical. The arrogance in their voices almost made me laugh. Practical? No, they weren't practical. They were predators circling a prize. Mr. Harris slid a thick folder across the table. Your father asked me to share something with you today, he said. Consider this a disclosure. Emily leaned in, frowning. Michael put his phone down for the first time all afternoon. I took a deep breath. When I bought that lottery ticket, I didn't think much of it. But I ended up winning $120 million. After taxes, that's about $70 million sitting in trusts, investments, and accounts that none of you know about. Their faces were priceless. Michael's mouth literally dropped open. Emily's eyes went wide, then narrowed. You're joking, she hissed. That's not possible. Mr. Harris tapped the folder. Bank statements, tax filings, the trust paperwork. It's very real. Michael suddenly found his voice. Wait, so all this time, you let us think you were broke? Why wouldn't you tell us? Because the minute I told you, I shot back, my voice rising for the first time, you'd stop seeing me as your father and start seeing me as a paycheck. And guess what? You proved me right. You couldn't even hide it. Emily, you gave your father-in-law a Rolex and me a $2 lottery ticket. Michael, you've been circling my house like a vulture. You both made it very clear where I stand in your lives. Emily's face turned red. That's not fair. You don't know what kind of pressure I'm under. Do you know how much debt Tyler and I have? I thought. You thought you could just cash in on me, I snapped. You didn't come to me as a daughter needing advice or love. You came to me as a banker with deep pockets. That's not family, Emily. That's exploitation. Michael slammed his palm on the table. So what, Dad? You're just gonna let us drown while you sit on millions? We're your kids. You owe us. I stood up slowly. My chair scraped the floor with a sound that cut through the tension like a blade. I don't owe you anything but honesty. And here's the truth. You treated me like garbage because you thought I was broke. You mocked me. You pitied me. You dismissed me. Well, now you know the truth. And that truth just showed me who you really are. Mr. Harris slid another document forward. This, he said, is the structure of the trust. Every cent of Mr. Miller's estate is directed toward charities, scholarships, and causes he chooses. None of it goes to his children unless they fulfill specific conditions he outlined. Emily grabbed the paper, scanning furiously. Conditions? What kind of conditions? I smiled, though there wasn't much humor in it. Simple ones. You want access to the trust? You show me a year of financial independence. That means no bailouts, no credit cards maxed out, no begging for cash. You prove you can stand on your own 2 feet. Until then, not a dime. Michael looked like he might explode. That's manipulation. No, I corrected, leaning closer. That's accountability. Something you both have avoided your whole lives. For the first time in years, I felt tall, taller than 6 feet, taller than any insult or dismissal they'd thrown at me. I wasn't the weak, forgotten father anymore. I was the man who had the power to set boundaries, and I wasn't afraid to use it. Emily's eyes filled with tears, not the soft kind, but hot, angry ones. You'll regret this, Dad, she spat. I shook my head slowly. No. For the first time, I think I won't. As they stormed out of the lawyer's office, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled, Mr. Harris turned to me with a satisfied smile. That, he said, was long overdue. And he was right. For once, the reversal wasn't just about money. It was about me taking back my dignity, my power, my voice. When the judge's gavel hit the wood that final morning, it was like the sound of a storm finally breaking. Months of lies, manipulation, and betrayal had dragged me through the mud, but in that single crack, I felt the weight of justice fall on the very people who thought I was powerless. The courtroom was tense. My son, Daniel, wouldn't meet my eyes. His wife, Melissa, sat beside him with her arms crossed like she was still in control of everything, as if she could bend reality the way she bent her Instagram followers' perception of their perfect life. But not here. Not in front of the law. The judge read the decision slowly, clearly. My house was legally mine again. Every forged signature Daniel had used to try and mortgage it without my consent was nullified. Every dollar Melissa had siphoned from my 401k under their fake emergency excuse was ordered to be repaid, plus interest. On top of that, Daniel was barred from accessing any of my financial records moving forward. When the words "full restitution" came out of the judge's mouth, Melissa's jaw dropped. She turned to Daniel, hissing under her breath, "We're screwed." I sat there, spine straight, hands folded in my lap, looking at the two of them with something I hadn't felt in months: calm. Not revenge, not anger, just peace. Afterward, my lawyer leaned close and whispered, "Congratulations, Evelyn. You did it." But I shook my head. "No," I said, eyes fixed on my son. "I didn't do this to win. I did this so he would finally understand there are consequences." The truth was, losing my husband years ago had already broken me once. And Daniel, my only son, was supposed to be the person who stood by me, not the one who gutted me from the inside out. But watching him that day, fidgeting like a boy caught with his hand in the cookie jar, I realized something. He wasn't the man I raised. Melissa had poisoned his sense of loyalty, sure, but Daniel had made his own choices. That cut deep. But it also freed me. Outside the courthouse, the local news crew shoved mics in my face. "Mrs. Brooks, what do you have to say to families who might find themselves in a similar situation?" I took a breath, and for once, I spoke not as a grieving widow or betrayed mother, but as a woman who had found her strength again. Don't ever let anyone, even family, steal your dignity. Money comes and goes, but boundaries matter. If someone crosses them, stand up. Protect yourself. Because love without respect isn't love, it's just control. Melissa yanked Daniel away from the cameras, muttering about suing me for slander. I almost laughed. She could try all she wanted, but the court documents were public record now. Their reputation was in shreds. And me? I walked down those courthouse steps lighter than I'd felt in years. That weekend, I hosted a dinner at my reclaimed home. My sister, Carol, came with her husband. My neighbor, Mr. Henderson, brought a bottle of red wine. We sat around the table, the same table where, months ago, Daniel had sneered at me during Christmas dinner and declared, "You're no longer family." I remembered that moment vividly, but instead of pain, I felt power. "Do you miss him?" Carol asked gently when we stepped onto the porch later that night. I stared up at the stars. Of course. He's my son. But love doesn't mean letting someone ruin you. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do is let them hit rock bottom without dragging yourself down with them. She squeezed my hand, and I realized I wasn't alone anymore. The isolation Melissa had wrapped around me was gone. I had my people back. Weeks later, I filed a restraining order, yes, against my own son and his wife. It wasn't out of hatred. It was out of necessity. They needed to learn I was no longer their personal ATM, their emotional punching bag, or their safety net. When I finally changed the locks and planted new flowers by the front porch, I stood back and smiled. The house wasn't just a building anymore, it was mine again. My safe place. My victory. And maybe, just maybe, one day Daniel would knock on my door, not to take, not to demand, but to apologize. If that day came, I'd decide then whether to let him back into my life. But until that day, I was done chasing after love that hurt me. Because here's the truth, sometimes family isn't blood. Sometimes family is the people who show up, who respect you, who sit with you at the table not because they want what's on your plate, but because they love you for being you. I had lost a son that year. But I had gained something more precious, my freedom, my dignity, and my voice. And no one could steal that again. When I look back at everything that happened, the moments still sting. My son's cruel words at Christmas dinner, the way he and his wife laughed at my pain, the greedy entitlement that nearly broke me. But now, with space and perspective, I see that what happened was more than just family betrayal. It was a hard, necessary lesson about boundaries, respect, and the kind of love that's worth keeping. In American culture, we like to say family is everything. And yes, family can be your strongest anchor. But family can also be the very storm that sinks you, if you let toxic relationships define your worth. Blood ties don't give anyone the right to disrespect you, manipulate you, or strip away your dignity. Respect has to be earned, no matter the DNA. I realized that I had spent so many years trying to keep the peace, that I forgot my own peace mattered too. My mortgage, my 401k, my years of saving and sacrificing, they weren't bargaining chips for my son to cash in on when he felt entitled. They were mine. They were proof of my sweat, my labor, my worth. And when he mocked me, when he said I was no longer family, that was the moment I finally understood. Love isn't about obligation. It's about choice. We can't always control how others treat us, but we can control what we allow in our lives. Sometimes empowerment looks like drawing a hard line, even if it means walking away from people you thought would be there forever. And sometimes justice isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming your power, standing tall, and saying, I decide what I deserve. To anyone listening who feels stuck in a toxic family dynamic, you are not trapped. You are not defined by someone else's cruelty. Your value is not up for debate. Set the boundary. Protect your peace. And remember, self-respect will always be worth more than forced loyalty. In the end, I didn't lose a son. I lost someone who didn't value me, and I gained back myself. Because here's the truth I want to leave you with. Blood makes you related. Respect makes you family. And that's the mic drop. That's Velvet Kiss Revenge.